From photosynthesis to muscle contraction. My name is Andrew. I'm a second-year medical student. Meet my best friend Jackson. He's a senior in college. This is Gatsby. He is a leprechaun. And this is my kitten Keto. It was exactly 4 weeks until step 1. I had just loaded a bolus of caffeine into my IV drip when I heard a knock at the door. It's open! Oh hey Jackson, I haven't seen you in forever.
I haven't seen you in forever. How's studying for step 1?
Well, I'm not sure when I showered last, and I think I'm developing a vitamin D deficiency.
Goodness gracious! Well, speaking of exams, my MCAT is next week. I can't believe what we have to know. I mean, how are circuits or Laplace's law relevant to becoming a doctor?
Muy importante, Jackson.
No way. Even the physics?
Even the physics. The journey from photosynthesis to muscle contraction. This series has 3 parts. Part 1. CARB-O-LOADIN. Photosynthesis, digestion, and absorption. Part 2. Where my protons at? Glycolysis, pyruvate decarboxylation, and the tricarboxylic acid cycle. Part 3. OMG, it's like a calcium party. The electron transport chain, action potential, and muscle contraction. I have embedded 10 quiz questions throughout the 3 parts. When we reach a question, press pause and continue when you are ready. Let's start with a question. What is the source of energy for sarcomere contraction?
ATP.
Yes, but where does the ATP come from?
Glucose?
Correct, but where does the glucose come from?
From plants?
Exactly. Our story begins with the sun. In the presence of sunlight, carbon dioxide combines with water to produce glucose and oxygen. The 6 carbons from the 6 molecules of carbon dioxide will form the 6-carbon backbone of glucose. Each of these carbons will generate ATP. Plants release oxygen, which humans consume. In turn, humans expire carbon dioxide, regenerating the substrates for photosynthesis. I have included these chloroplasts to make 2 points. Point 1. These photosynthetic pigments enable plant cells to utilize solar energy to produce sugars. Notice the stacking of the thylakoids, which greatly increases the surface area for photosynthesis. Hashtag surface area. This theme will be repeating itself throughout our discussion. Point 2. MCAT examiners expect you to understand the concept of endosymbiosis, a term you probably already associate with mitochondria. Well, guess what? Chloroplasts are yet another example of endosymbiosis. Chloroplasts trace their origin as eukaryotic organelles way back when a larger eukaryotic cell engulfed a cyanobacterium. That eukaryotic cell essentially stumbled upon a solar panel. Hashtag endosymbiosis. There are 3 forms of carbohydrates. A lollipop consists of monosaccharides, such as glucose and fructose. Milk consists of disaccharides, such as lactose. Bread consists of polysaccharides, such as starch. Large carbohydrates are simply polymers of monosaccharides. Polysaccharide digestion begins in the mouth by the enzyme amylase, which is secreted by the salivary glands. Amylase begins to break these large polymers into monomers. Why? Carbohydrates can only be absorbed as monosaccharides. So, before we can absorb these monosaccharides in the small intestine, polysaccharides and disaccharides must first be broken into their monosaccharide building blocks. The digestive system has 2 divisions, the alimentary canal and accessory organs. The alimentary canal consists of a series of hollow organs, including the mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, colon, and anus. Accessory organs participate in digestion, but are not hollow like the organs of the alimentary canal. These organs include the salivary glands, teeth, tongue, liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. Following ingestion, carbohydrates undergo mechanical digestion, chemical digestion, and absorption. Mechanical digestion consists of chewing, churning, and segmentation. Chemical digestion involves the enzymatic action of amylase and disaccharidase. Absorption takes place at the small intestine. Let's continue with the esophagus. The esophagus connects the oral cavity to the stomach. Peristalsis consists of waves of muscular contraction which propel the food bolus toward the stomach. Jackson, what do your esophagus and anus have in common?
Well, last night
Jackson, we have an audience here. I was referring to the fact that, compared to the rest of your alimentary canal, only the esophagus and anus are under partial conscious control. You can try it right now, swallowing and tightening your sphincter. The majority of the alimentary canal is under involuntary parasympathetic control. And it's time for your first quiz question. Press pause, resume when you are ready. The answer is A, acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is the chief mediator of the parasympathetic nervous system. A useful way to remember the effects of the parasympathetic nervous system is sludge. In fact, sludge syndrome characterizes symptoms triggered by excessive cholinergic activity. S, salivation. L, lacrimation. U, urination. D, defecation. G, gastrointestinal motility. E, emesis. Sludge syndrome. On to the stomach. The stomach participates in mechanical digestion of carbohydrates, increasing the surface area on which pancreatic amylase and small intestine disaccharidase can enzymatically catabolize carbohydrates into monosaccharides. Remember, carbohydrates can only be absorbed as a single saccharide. We have arrived at the small intestine, and it's time for another quiz question. Press pause. Resume when you are ready. The correct answer is C, duodenum, ampulla of Vater, jejunum, ileum. The small intestine has three segments, in the following order: duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. The ampulla of Vater is the junction of the common bile and pancreatic ducts. These ducts empty into the duodenum. This should be intuitive if you understand the main function of each of the three segments of the small bowel. The duodenum primarily participates in digestion. Digestion at the duodenum, D and D, well, that's convenient, while the jejunum and ileum participate in absorption. Thus, if digestion occurs at the duodenum, we would want to deliver bile and digestive enzymes to the duodenum. Food must be digested before it can be absorbed. Jackson, if the small intestine were a DJ, what would his name be?
How about DJ Ilium? Yeah, get it? Duodenum, jejunum, ileum. DJ Ilium. DJ Ilium.
DJ ileum, churning out some serious peristaltic activity at the distal small intestine. The small intestine increases its surface area on three levels: plicae circularis, villi, and microvilli. Plicae circularis are gross foldings of intestinal mucosa. Villi are small finger-like protrusions projecting out from the plicae circularis. And microvilli are tiny villi. Get it? Microvilli? Jackson, if you were to take your small intestine and lay it out flat, it would cover the surface area of an entire tennis court. Now that's #surface area. Press pause. Resume when you are ready. To begin with, sucrose and lactose are disaccharides, which eliminates choices D and E. There are three main monosaccharide units: glucose, galactose, and fructose. Glucose and galactose absorption occur through sodium-mediated co-transport. In intestinal cells, like all cells of your body, the sodium-potassium ATPase maintains a low intracellular sodium concentration. This is primary active transport because sodium-potassium exchange is directly dependent on ATP hydrolysis. This creates a gradient for sodium to diffuse from the intestinal lumen into intestinal cells. Glucose and galactose piggyback on this gradient. This is secondary active transport because this piggybacking indirectly requires ATP hydrolysis, that is, hydrolysis of ATP to maintain the low intracellular sodium concentration. The absorption of fructose, on the other hand, is mediated by facilitated diffusion, that is, utilizing a carrier transport protein without energy expenditure. This means that fructose absorption will not be affected by blocking the sodium-potassium ATPase. Thus, the answer is C, fructose. The GLUT2 transporter moves all monosaccharides from enterocyte into the portal circulation, headed for the liver.